Welcome to Spirit of the Game, brought to you by the Colorado Golf Association. Here are your hosts, CGA Executive Director Ed Mate and CGA Director of Rules and Competitions, Lewis Harry.
All right, here we are again for another edition of Spirit of the Game. This is Ed Mate.
Lewis Harry.
And it is now September. So we can look back now on the, by the way, this was the 128th?
Third.
123rd. I don't know where I got 8. U.S. Amateur played at Cherry Hills. We were just chatting before we hit the record button here whether or not the champion, Nick Dunlap, will be a household name a la Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas, or if he will be a forgotten one, much like Stephen Fox. Time will tell. But certainly it was a historic week, fun to have the National Amateur back in Colorado. We've had a nice run at Cherry Hills now, 1990, 2012, and now 2023. I really thought that the attendance was amazing. The junior experience that they put on was fantastic. A lot of great work by many people to make it such a success, I thought.
Yeah, it was good.
Okay, so to segue into this, so I'm standing on the 14th green, watching the final match play out. Neil Shipley, Nick Dunlap, good match. Kind of unfortunate how it concluded. Not the best, some bogeys, even a double bogey. But I'm standing on the 14th tee, and Shipley has a bogey putt to have the hole, tie the hole. There we go. Is that on our list, by the way? Have? Is that still a word? Well, that's a teaser. Today we're going to talk about words of golf, words of wisdom, rules terminology, rules of golf terminology. So anyway, I'm standing there. Shipley's putt misses. And now Dunlap is dormy 4, to use a term that no longer exists in the rules. He's 4 up with 4 to play. And I couldn't help myself eavesdropping and listening in on the hushed conversations of those in attendance saying, oh, it looks like Shipley's now dormy. Because dormy just sounds bad. So forever and ever, golfers have misused the term dormy. And now so much so that it's been expunged from the rules, no longer exists. But again, just to clean that up, if you read my monthly article for this month's magazine, I talk about dormy. And in my view, the sad loss of a very quaint term that had kind of a cool poetic history. The term dormir, from the French verb to sleep, was used to describe a player who is as many holes up as there are remaining. But again, the crowd there in attendance at Cherry Hills assumed it was a bad thing and thought Shipley was dormy when in fact Dunlap was dormy. And the match went to the 15th. The hole was tied with pars. And as a result, that was it. The U.S. Amateur Championship was concluded 5-4. So that got me thinking about other terms in the rules that have either been replaced, dropped, whatever it may be. So we've compiled a list, not by no means complete, but a pretty good list of terms that kind of fall into this category of the lost and the misused. So first of all, before we move on to the list, what do you think of dormy? Do you wish they'd kept dormy? Don't feel strongly about it the way I do?
I don't feel strongly about it. It's not a term that I was ever attached to in any way.
Yeah. Did you find that people misused it all the time?
Yeah. Much like another term on this list that comes right after dormy on our list, it was a vastly misused term.
Okay. Well, let's go there. So what's next on our list here?
Well, we're going to go back to the first one here, all square halved, which now became tied in our current lingo.
Right.
Or our current terminology. It's aligns with other sports. I mean, you never heard when a basketball game was 85 in the fourth quarter. Oh, both teams are all square here in the fourth.
Right.
It's tied is just a common term.
The game is halved at the moment.
Yeah.
But again, it really harkens back to the history of the rules and how old they are and how far back they are dated. I don't know of another sport that has roots as deep. What was the original 13, 17, whatever? We should know that on a podcast called Spirit of the Game. I should definitely know that. But anyway, they're old, and these terms have kind of hung around. And I guess I'm kind of on the fence on it. Is sort of an overarching philosophy here as we go through the list. I'm all for clarity. I'm all for let's use terms that are current and that describe better, so there's no misunderstanding. On the other hand, I have to say, much like Dormy, I miss some of these other more artful terms. Halved, all square. All it does though is create it. Tied is so much better. The match is tied. I know you got to officiate this year's amateur. Did you get to say tied and all square? You didn't? Did you mess that up at all?
I did not mess that up. I did get to say tied. No, actually, you know what? I never got to say tied in my match. I don't think.
Somebody was always...
maybe once because someone went up. Someone won the first hole.
Okay.
Actually, one time I said tied after the second hole because Mull won the first hole. Johnson won the second hole to get back to tied.
Yeah.
So we were tied on the third tee.
So
from the third tee on, someone led the match.
Right. So just to back up just a minute for our listener, what did you get to do during the amateur, real quick? You were part of the team. So
I worked with the USGA Rules and Competitions team for 9 days, 8.5 days. And I got to walk through Cherry Hills, mark the golf course, do some setup items over there. I get to walk Colorado Golf Club, mark the golf course, do some setup items over there. And then during the practice rounds, I get to go do setup each morning, set hole locations with the hole cutter each morning, pick out the hole location for it was already, I didn't pick it out. It was already set in stone by the time I got there, but.
Right.
Do set tees every morning for the practice rounds, and then for stroke play rounds, I was at Colorado Golf Club. I was a just general rover, timing groups, making sure groups are still in position, roving around the golf course, giving a couple rulings here and there, but just I wasn't assigned to a zone. I was just a general rover during stroke play at Colorado Golf Club. Once we got into match play at Cherry Hills, I was the referee for match 32 in the round of 64, William Mull and Tobias Johnson. So I refereed that match on Wednesday. Thursday, I was the forward observer for a match in the morning and then just roved in the afternoon. And then that completed once we're past the round of 16.
Yeah.
The field gets pretty small.
Right.
The guys low on the totem pole like me get cut. The committee members move in.
Much like the less skilled players. You're less skilled rules guy. No, I'm kidding. You should have been refereeing the final match. Okay, well, I think that's just good context as we kind of put a timestamp on this historic conversation we're having here. Okay, so we've covered the first two on our list. Kind of we have them broken into two columns, pre-2019 and the present day. And then we have a list of others that are just terms that kind of, have always been misused or just made our list.
There's a couple in there and the others that probably should be up in our pre-2019 to present day, but
fair enough.
That's fine.
So let's move on to one I do love, Rub of the Green. Rub of the Green is no longer in the book, much like Dormy. It's been expunged. I missed that one. Do you miss that one? Probably not.
Well, I think much like Dormy, it was just misused.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't really Rub of the Green. A bad break was always Rub of the Green. That's not it at all.
A stroke of bad luck, or oh man, that's unfortunate. It always it's Rub of the Green. It's Rub of the Green, which it really wasn't.
No, a Rub of the Green was a ball in motion stopped or deflected by
an outside agency.
By an outside agency, another term that is outside agency's gone too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's down in our other list.
Let's not jump too far ahead. It gets better and better as we go through this list. No, that's so true, and you'd hear it all the time, particularly on television. That's where these terms really, got put on stage when the television broadcasters would misuse them and. Rules officials from around the world would text each other and saying, "Did you hear what Mike Tirico just said?" As their blood pressure skyrockets. No, so Rub of the Green was always a bad break. Rub of the Green could be a great break. It's just, a rub of the green. The green in the historic context was the golf course. The green was everything. That's where the term green fee comes from. Everything, not just the greens you putt on, but the entire park, so to speak.
Again, it's not that I was attached to it or I could care either way, but it's one that, again, misused widely, very, very, misinterpreted of what it actually was. So I think it's a good thing just to get it out of the definitions and just remove it completely. So
Doesn't mean people won't still use or misuse the term.
A lot of these terms on this list, people continue to still use.
Okay, what's next?
Probably my favorite on this list, and one that I don't think ever will get out of the lingo of golfers is the term hazard.
Yeah.
I actually just was talking to a head pro this morning that had a rules question from his ladies club championship. And he must have used hazard at least 4 times during the conversation.
Yeah.
And I always feel like kind of like a jerk when someone uses hazard and then 2 seconds.
Just to clarify, you are a jerk, so it's probably good that you feel like a jerk every once in a while, right?
Well, some of the players at the USAM who I told that they were being timed probably thought I was a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. It comes with the territory.
No, but I always feel like a jerk when someone says hazard, and then 2 seconds later in my reply, I turn around and say penalty area.
Right.
Like I'm trying to intentionally correct them. But with any of these terms, using the right terminology, especially from someone in a rules context, is extremely important. One, because if you using the right terminology, it's going to help that person understand what it is,
right,
and where to go find it. Because if I use hazard in a wrong way, or if I use hazard, and someone goes and tries to find that in the book to see what I was talking about, they're never going to find it.
Right.
The other part of it too is that when you're talking about the rules and you're someone like in a position like we are, you want to look like you know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And if you start using incorrect terminology, or you start using words that don't exist anymore, it starts to make it seem like you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. So when you used, he says hazard, you say tomato, you say penalty area, this unnamed will protect his identity for sake of failing, not embarrassment. Did he pick up on that and start referring to it as a penalty area, or did he keep using hazard?
No, he kept using hazard.
Okay.
It's just, which is fine.
Yeah.
It didn't change.
It didn't seem to sink in.
It didn't change my interpretation.
Well, and again, my view of penalty area, and you're right, hazard is going to be hard to expunge, even though it has been removed from the book. I like the term area because now we're really close to having a game board where the areas of the golf course, as I just said, are just that. They're areas where the rules differ. And so having them referred to as areas, I think is very helpful. So you kind of wrap your brain around it. Instead of teeing ground, we have a teeing area. I know that's later on our list. So the whole theme of area, I guess the only area that didn't make that list is the putting green. I guess the next step is we're going to call it the putting area. Wouldn't that be?
Bunkers as well. You don't call them bunker areas.
That's true. Sandy areas. Now that wouldn't work because there's lots of sandy areas that are not quote unquote bunkers. So anyway, I agree with you, and I'm sure if I'm listening back to things I say all the time, I say hazard a lot.
My one. Let's finish with penalty area. My one gripe with penalty area, and this was pointed out to me by a newer golfer a year or two ago, was when they were learning golf. Mm-hmm. They picked it up after 2019, so anything pre-2019 didn't really exist in their head. Mm-hmm. Which actually, if you're someone who's picking up golf and trying to learn the rules, that's probably the best place to start. Is if there's nothing prior to 2019 to confuse you, you're kind of just a blank slate. So everything,
rules amnesia.
Everything present today is just new information for you. So it's probably the easiest way to. Probably easier for that person to learn than someone who's been around for 30 years. But they pointed out the word penalty area to me, and they had the idea in their head when they first started that their ball just being in the penalty area was giving them the penalty. So, and I stepped back for 2 seconds, and I thought about that. I was like, well, I could see how someone with limited knowledge, and you tell them, hey, your ball is in a penalty area.
Right.
I could see how they could infer that, because now my ball is there in that area.
And therefore,
Now-
there's a penalty.
Now there's a penalty
yeah,
for
that's a
me
good
to
point.
and I thought about that. I was like, well, it's a good point, and it's one knock that I would have against that term penalty
I
area.
never thought of that. Yeah, because if your ball's in there and it's playable and you hit it out, there was no penalty.
Nope.
Yeah, very good. Interesting. That's why I love doing rule seminars, because you always get a question or a comment that you never thought of, and I think it's really kind of fun. All right, next one I'll take is it's probably appropriate that I take this because I still use it. I can't get rid of fellow competitor.
Yeah, I'll as well. I'll claim that I still use it from time to time.
Well, and where this really gets interesting from a rule, well, where it carries over is in TV commentary, where commentators would really struggle because they wouldn't say fellow competitor, they would say partner, playing partner. That's a term they use all the time. His playing partner, instead of fellow competitor. Now, now we're all wrong. It used to be some of us were right. Now we're all 100%, because now it's been replaced with just another player. That's not a definition, another player, but that's how you have it described here. So
It's not a definition, but the other thing too is there's a very clear distinction here between stroke play and match play.
Mm-hmm.
In match play, we still have the term opponents.
right,
And that existed prior to 2019. It exists today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very match play specific term. With fellow competitor, it was always inferred to be a stroke play term
right,
because you don't have an opponent in stroke play. Anytime you come across something in the rules that talks about what used to be a fellow competitor, the rules always talk about it as another player in stroke play.
okay.
So it's not necessarily a definition, but that's just the way that it's
Well, and just so
written.
I'm reflecting back, a fellow competitor prior to 2019 was somebody who was in your pairing group, right? Or was it not necessarily just somebody in your pairing group? And it's not. We shouldn't belabor it. I don't think that's true. A fellow competitor could be.
I think fellow
Just
competitors could have been any other player on the
right,
course.
right. But there is this distinction, real, even though it doesn't necessarily matter, that there's people on the golf course. Let's take stroke play. There's a whole bunch of us on the golf course playing in the competition. Some of them are in our group. Some of them are not. Is there a need, or does it matter that some of the people in our group, and that's where the commentators would get hung up and have to use terms like playing partner to try to describe the difference between players A, B, and C in one group versus the next group of players in front or behind them. So, and again, the whole, not to get too far afield here, the whole topic of backstopping that I'm pleased to say seems to be cured, where players in a given group would sort of, have a either complicit or unspoken agreement that they were going to help each other, because you do, and they talk all the time, and it does matter who you're playing with. When you're playing with somebody who's playing great, you tend to play better. When you're playing with somebody who's a jerk, you don't like. So there is a this factors in to golf competition who you're paired with, but from a rules and terminology standpoint, it doesn't matter.
No, from a rule standpoint, they're going to be defined the same way as any other person on the golf course.
Right. Okay. What's next?
Through the green. Again, another a term I think most people knew what through the green was. I think there was a little bit of confusion on what through the green is. But it's just a term that it has the same definition today that it did in 19. It encompasses mostly the same area of the golf course. It's just called something different today.
Which is?
General area.
Yeah. Again, that gets us back to area. It also gets us back to television commentators who, when a player would hit the ball over the green, they'd say he hit it through the green, and all the rules officials around the world would just, gulp and gasp and, get an airsick bag or, get out the defibrillator as they couldn't handle it. But again, I mean, so that created a ton of confusion. I know that Lou Blakey had to rebrand his website, right?
He did. It was went from throughthegreen.org to generalarea.org.
Yeah, not nearly as cool and poetic as.
By the way, not run by John Vanderboort now.
Oh,
Not
okay.
Lou Blakey
Okay.
anymore, so.
Yeah.
And just a small.
Well, and again, through the green takes us back to rub of the green being the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. In both of those cases, a rub of the green was something that happened where a ball was deflected on the entire playing field, and a through the green was referring to the entire playing field, other than those things that were not through the green. So anyway, again, probably there's a thematic tie here as we talk through this list of getting rid of terms that were confusing. So far, all the lists they've dropped were somewhat confusing and misused.
And I think it goes with hazard, rub of the green, dormy, all square. I think a lot of these terms that are on our list that were pre-2019, I think people who have played golf for a long time have some sort of attachment to these terms. I don't know why. Seems odd to me to have a burning attachment to words.
Okay. Well, we're going to jump around then, because this you just teed me up for the very attachment, which is the term Stableford, which is still in the book, and it is there proudly. Stableford is a form of play, a stroke play competition where you play against a fixed score. During my short tenure on the Rules Committee, I attempted unsuccessfully to introduce a parenthetical that better described Stableford, because I think it's a wonderful form of play. The mistake I made, I think, was I say this I mean, it didn't gain favor. It was approved to add a parenthetical that would say right afterward, also known as points. I think there's two problems with that. One, it really isn't known as points. I think it's a good term for people, and it does accurately describe, and the word points, I don't have the definition in front of me, probably does show up in there, so there's certainly a strong rationale for it. But more importantly, attachment to words. Dr. Frank Stableford is a revered figure in golf, particularly for those who hail from the other side of the pond, and they absolutely refused to even budge an inch to suggest that Stableford could be known as something else. And I suppose the Aussies felt the same way, because they play Stableford almost exclusively, or at least that is the predominant form of play when you travel to Australia. I've never been there, but that's what I hear. So again, here's where we're clinging to a word, and I think it's working against. We're working against ourselves. I mean, the whole idea in 2019 was to modernize the rule book, to bring it up to speed and use plain English and describe things, and yet we keep a term like Stableford. So, but dropped rub of the green, dropped dormy, dropped through the green. So I do think there's a little bit of hypocrisy there that I can't quite explain, other than, as you just said, clinging.
I don't understand it, because I just don't have any strong attachments to any words in the rule book. Mm-hmm. But I know there's people that just refuse to give up some of these words. They refuse to call a match tied. They refuse to call a red penalty area anything but a lateral water hazard.
Yeah.
And it's if that keeps your enjoyment of the game the way it is, using old terminology, then by all means knock yourself out. But I guess I just don't care enough to hold on to words like that.
Well, and again, the story real quick on Stableford is this gentleman who was, I guess, a fairly famous person outside of golf, had a very high ranking position. I think he was in the railroad business or something, but he played infamously. I think it was at Carnoustie. I'm probably wrong. I'd love to get some emails correcting us on some of these things. That tells us, validating our time spent on these wonderful discussions. But anyway, made a big number late in his round and had an entire day ruined by one hiccup. Of course, we have the handicap system that allows us to take a maximum score, but that doesn't take away the sting of having a great round ruined. And so at that point, the epiphany occurred, and Dr. Frank said, hey, how about we just play for points, and we just sort of, if you have a bad hole, you just get 0 points. It doesn't ruin your day. Brilliant idea. And it was so brilliant, they named it after him, and it's still alive today. So there you have it. So I would say, if you're listening, go play for points. And if you want to call it Stableford, you can, but it's a great way to play golf. All right, let's jump back up into our list here.
So We have one more in our top column, 19 to 20. We won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's this is more for the rules officials, nerds, people who are deep in the rules. But pre 2019, we had what was called a decisions book, decisions on the rules of golf. And when the modernization took place in 19, the decisions book went away. In came the official guide to the rules of golf. Still serves the same main purpose, but out went the decisions. In came, in 19, what were known as interpretations for each rule. And then now in 23, we've gotten rid of that and we have clarifications to each rule.
Is there also interpretations?
Interpretations no longer exist. That only exist from 19 to 22.
Okay. So
we
that's
also
already
had clarification. We also had clarifications at the same time from 19 to 22.
Okay, but now the term is clarification.
Clarification.
So for those of us that have a hard time rewiring our brains, if we used to say decisions, we should now say clarifications.
Correct.
And if we're referring to a book, there is not a clarification. It was the decisions book, and in the decisions book contained 1,800 some decisions. Now, and they weren't really decisions because some of them were just clarifications, or
Well, some of them were just,
but they were called decisions.
they're answers to questions.
Right.
Is what they were.
Yeah, we call it that. So now, what is the book itself called? It's still the
The
guide?
official guide to the rules of golf.
Okay.
Which it may
Get another name?
get another name.
It may become
27.
clarifications to the rules of golf. Why don't we call it what it is?
What it may become, and this is what I think it'll become, and maybe I'm just, this is in my own head, but I always thought when that book came out was that the official part of it was stating its officialness, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the official guide. But as the years went on, I started thinking that it's actually the rules official guide. And the rules is just dropped.
Right.
So what it may become is the referee's guide, is what I think it'll eventually become, is the referee. Because I've noticed in the last handful of years, the term referee has taken hold over rules official.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for whatever reason, we always used to think as referee as a match play
Right.
term, but it really applies to both forms of play.
Right.
So possibly in 27, if the USJ is not already listening, please consider that and cut me a check for my idea.
Yeah, there you go.
But I think it'll become the referee's guide at some point.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I'll try to be better. I'll call it clarifications, but that's a tough one. That might even be harder than hazard for me. Okay, now we're jumping down to just sort of miscellaneous, and they're trying to see if there's a couple, right? The first two are really parlance. Is that a word? What's the word? Yeah. Parlance. Parlance. Whatever. There's another good word. I love words. I love to misuse words. That's my favorite thing to do.
It's kind of the whole topic of this podcast.
So sand trap. And right next to it, pin. So when I first started working for the CGA, dating myself in the 1980s, we did lots of rule seminars, pre-PowerPoint, on a rules blanket. And in the props inside the carry bag for the rules blanket were a mousetrap that had the word trap written on it, and a huge safety pin that was handed out as a booby prize whenever someone asked a question using the term pin or trap. And it was always a little sort of, I thought it was almost cruel, so I didn't do it. But I think some of our other more zealous instructors enjoyed handing these out to a sheepish, innocent, somebody could ask a great question, and instead of addressing a great question, but they use the word trap in it, they get handed a trap and everybody laugh at them. So anyway, these terms still exist today. People use them all the time. We call it, a lot of people call it the pin sheet, referring to the whole location sheet. And trap also gets used a lot. I happen to like both those terms because they're one syllable, they're easy to say, and they really are descriptive. So what does a bunker do? It traps the ball. That's the idea there. So I think it's a really great. And again, if you really dug into the etymology of trap in a golf context, I'll bet you it may be older than bunker. It wouldn't surprise me. It's actually older. And maybe we should have never moved away from trap. I don't know. Why is bunker so much better than trap? A bunker? Think about that. Yeah. A bunker is like, that's a military term. You're in a bunker. a trap. I don't know. To me, it's not much of an improvement, and it's still.
People are going to think I'm the most apathetic person in the world, but I don't care about either one. Use whichever you feel like. I'll continue to use bunker because it's the correct word, but I won't get offended if someone calls it a sand trap.
Would you ever, even in your relaxed moments when you're reflecting over a round with a beer with your buddies, would you ever say pin?
Probably.
Yeah, okay. But you wouldn't say trap.
Probably not.
Yeah. But you might
bunker,
say pin.
bunker, I will say as being the correct one.
But trap will never come out of your mouth unless you're talking about something to trap an animal.
Pin. I mean, I will fully admit, pin slips out of my mouth all the time.
Yeah.
As just not even really thinking about. Now if I.
So sometimes you drop a pin, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah. Someone will ask me about, do you have, where's the pin sheets? It's like, pin sheets are on the first tee.
Yeah.
Or whatever the case is, but no, sand trap. Yeah, use it however you like.
I could hear you say, "Yeah, we tucked the pin on that one." I could say that, tuck the pin. Yeah,
it slips out time to time.
All right. Well, I'm with you. I'm now. I guess I'm not apathetic because I do care, and I think people who use the term trap and pin should not be punished or treated as, cruelly or embarrassed. I think that's fine.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think so either. I think people have gotten words hammered into their head from over time, and whether it's correct or not, and it just sticks.
Okay, you take the next couple here.
So the next handful probably could have gone up in our columns from pre-19 to present day, but not one I see people misuse that much anymore, just because how many casual golfers were walking around saying outside agency to begin with, but the term outside agency becoming outside influence in 2019, just to describe either another player in stroke play, a spectator, an animal, something other than the player, the player's caddy, an opponent in stroke play, or natural forces that could move a golf ball or influence what can happen to a golf ball.
Yeah, and I think that probably is part of the plain English and translation cleanup from 2019 into 2019, where because agency has, if you think about translating that word into Spanish and French, and oh my goodness, just like we might as well jump down to that one: casual water versus temporary water. Trying to translate casual versus temporary, and the term influence is a much better. Don't you think it's better than agency?
Well, yeah. I'll skip back to casual water here in a second, but it describes exactly what it's describing, right?
Yeah.
It's
what, casual water?
No. Outside influence, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about an outside influence, it's something that's influencing,
right?
A player,
as opposed to
player's
agency.
Ball.
Yeah.
Right?
So
it's either something that moved the ball, something that deflected the ball. It's something that's influencing what's happening to the ball. So it just makes sense to call it an outside influence.
Yeah, and that's one I definitely will continue to have struggle getting out of my mouth. I'll say outside agency because I've been saying it for so long. So what do you intrigue me? What, you have a problem with casual water? Or you think it's
this was probably the first year of 19. I was officiating somewhere, and someone asked me about, is this, and this was, maybe I was a bigger jerk back then. And I like to,
you're trending in the right direction.
But I do remember in 19, temporary water was the first term I really had hammered in my head of the new terminology. Casual water went right out the door. Temporary water came in. Yeah. Probably just because I thought it was such a better term to describe what it was. It's water that's there temporarily. Right. And I remember this player asked me, is this casual water? And I don't take credit for this response. I maybe heard it somewhere else before this, but I responded to the player by saying, as opposed to what, formal water?
Yeah.
And
it's a water wearing a tuxedo. It's a business attire.
I just think out of all the terminology changes, that one's probably one of the best ones. Yeah. Casual water was such a bad.
Yeah.
It's such a bad
I
term.
agree, and I don't have any romantic, about
and
that.
It's a term
that one.
And it's just like hazard. Players today still, it's stuck in their head, and they'll continue to use it, and it's just it won't go away.
Yep, no doubt. wonder why it stuck around that long when you think about how good a change that was. We skipped over, I think, at least one. Well, we talked about it earlier. The areas, teeing area has been replaced the term teeing ground. Abnormal ground condition has been replaced with abnormal course condition. Probably makes sense. I mean,
another. It better describes what it's trying to describe, or what fits the definition. And just like teeing ground becoming area, that's describing an area of the golf course. An abnormal course condition now is describing something that's on the course.
Right, and there's a connection. The dots are connected to other terms that will lead you, instead of pointing to a term that doesn't exist, or it's really been. And that's when you rewrite something from the ground up, as the rule makers did in 2019. You have a chance to kind of clean your closet and get rid of some clothes you don't need, and have those wide lapels or whatever. Another one that is tied to a rules change is burrowing animal hole has been replaced by animal hole. And again, that's one I'll continue to struggle with, because for so long been using the term burrowing animal. But why don't you explain the rules change behind that term change?
Well, simply just dropping the burrowing part of that, it just simplifies that relief in general and what is an animal hole. Right? It's, it just, if you look at the definition of animal hole, it just tells you it's any hole dug by an animal and parts of the tracks or trails leading into the hole. Now, there's a caveat for that if it's also an animal that's a loose impediment, like an ant, a worm, or an insect, we're going to throw that hole out.
Right.
That's not going to count under this definition.
Well, where I was going with the rules change, it used to be you had to be a bit of a zoologist or entomologist to figure out
whether it was a burrowing animal,
whether you got relief or not. So what is it? Was it a dog that happened to be chasing a rabbit and aggressively dug a quick hole, or was it actually a rabbit that dug a hole trying to get away from the dog? You had to know the difference between the two. Now it's just, if an animal created it, you get relief from it.
Well,
with those exceptions that you mentioned. So
just another simplification.
So don't say burrowing animal hole anymore. Just say that's an animal hole. So there you go. One that I think probably would make it to the very top of our list if we were taking this like we did, the most violated rules, the most misused terms in the rules of golf would probably be this one. Instead of four ball, people say best ball. And that a four ball is when two players on a side representing a side each play their own ball, and they count the better ball, another term that gets used wrongly. Best ball and better ball do not exist in the rules, to my knowledge, or do they?
They don't exist in the rules, but best ball exists as a format.
Oh, yes, you're right. But it's a weird format.
It's a match play format where a side of two players is playing a four ball against a single.
Yeah, right.
As in a match.
Can you imagine if the world of golf had to start every time you use the term best ball, you said, okay, you have to drop out. We're going to go to a threesome, and you're playing a match against these two.
It's a bizarre format, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of three ball.
Yeah.
Where you
got three concurrent
three players, A, B, and C. A's playing a match against B. B's playing a match against C. C's playing a match against A.
Yeah, and then you get all to the nuance of one of those balls is moved, who moved it, or
or a stroke is recalled, but it's only recalled by one player, not the other player. Now you have two balls in play.
Right.
Bizarre format.
But again, I mean, when you'll hear it at the Ryder Cup, it'll slip out. Maybe we have a drinking game. Where how many times will a commentator say the best ball portion instead of the four ball portion? They're pretty good about it now, I think, and it's been pretty well ingrained in them at this point. But it'll probably come out. Somebody, John, what's the guy's name? John Wood, who's the caddy, who's a former caddy, who's a very good commentator. I could see him. If I had to put my money on a player to use best ball, it'd be him. If he's there at the Ryder Cup.
He was actually on the TV coverage of the
Amateur.
The Amateur.
I know, he did a good job. I liked his very good insights. So anyway, that's just one that definitely people struggle with. So just to be clear, the most common form of play that we see in this country should be called a four ball. And that's when at your local country club, golf course, whatever it may be, and four players show up and they decide they're going to throw up balls and play a friendly game and play that $2 Nassau, and player A and player B are aside, and player C and D are aside, and they go play a fun round of golf, and they count the better score of the side, and that's the one, and forget strokes and all the other things. That is a 4-ball. It's not a best ball. That is a 4-ball, and it's not a better ball. It is a 4-ball. And again, the cue to help people remember that has always been how many balls are being played, and the answer is 4. And that brings us to our last one, alternate shot or foursomes. This is the only one on the list that I could see where a parenthetical was introduced. The term foursome is still the defined term for this form of play, alternate shot, and it now says parenthetically, also known as alternate shot. So we didn't drop the term altogether and talk about confusing, because how many times do we say foursome? Who's in my foursome? Again, that is referring to a very, very specific form of play that is played almost exclusively at Muirfield in Scotland, and that's an alternate shot, or also known as Scotch. I don't think, does Scotch show up in the rule book? Probably not. And that's got to be from Scotland. They played it in Scotland.
Yeah, it shows somewhat. It's not the term of it, but I think the format of it shows up in the other forms of stroke play section in if you go, and it's way tucked in the committee procedures, way back in the book of other forms of play. Not necessarily other forms of stroke play, because there's a rule that talks about other forms of stroke play, but it's way tucked back in the committee procedures about other forms of play, and I think the rules call it greensomes.
Okay.
If you look up greensomes, I think it's essentially what that format is.
And the trick was to remember the difference from a rules standpoint, not from casual conversation standpoint, between a 4-ball and a foursomes. Some people would say some of the players are playing some of the time, hence the term foursome. Again, who knows where that term? We'll have to get a historian on to explain the history of that rule. It's a wonderful form of play. I actually played it recently. Our friends at the Fried Egg, who do a wonderful job promoting Common Ground, promoting golf course architecture, probably my favorite podcast, other than this one, of course. And they were at Common Ground, and the format in the morning was a 4-ball, and the format in the afternoon was a foursome. So I got to play an alternate shot format with Emily Olson here on our staff, and we actually shot 72. I think that was pretty good playing. Yeah. And that's including my skull over the green on number 1. Emily drove it to 90 yards short of the green. I sculled it almost into the native. She chipped it on reasonably close. I putted it about 12 feet by, and she couldn't cover for me on that one, so that was our double. And then we played the rest of the round 1 under. So anyway, pretty cool. Pretty cool, fun format. I've never personally played a foursome match. I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, I've never played match play foursomes. I do like the format. I think it's cool. I think just the knock on it gets is that people just don't feel like they're playing the full round.
They feel cheated.
They feel like they're playing half the shots.
And I kind of, particularly when you're playing it in the afternoon and you already played a full 18 of 4-ball in the morning, it's kind of nice to know you're not going to be responsible for hitting every shot. So
yeah, the thing though, last thing I'll say about foursomes is we'll wrap up here. But I often hear people saying, they're true alternate shot, or
right, true,
and that really doesn't exist as a format under the rules,
right?
Because if for what people think is true alternate shot is player A holes out and now B is up on the tee,
right? Or they'll say true meaning the way it's defined, meaning you pick odds and evens and that's what you stick with. So I never know when they say true, which true are you referring to?
Correct.
The literal? That's what we should call it. Literal alternate shot versus alternate shot.
I don't think there should have to be any clarification, because the format's the format.
I know, I agree. So. But it is definitely true. Yeah. So with that, speaking of the truth has come, and it's time to say goodbye for another Spirit of the Game. So this is Ed Mate saying, talk to you next month.
All right, until next time.
That was fun, Louis.
Yep.